What's up, everybody? Mothercross 316 back with another comic book flashback. Today we are looking at The Amazing Spider-Man, issue number 81. This issue came out in February of 1970, and today we are looking at a first appearance, and that is the first appearance of the Kangaroo. So he makes his very first appearance here. He's a unique villain, and he's a villain that a lot of people don't know about. So I'm happy to just go ahead and review this story. This is going to reveal a little bit about the Kangaroo, a little bit about his origin story. So now let's go ahead and dive on into the day's story. But as always, before we get started, we got to give credit where credit is due. And so this issue is brought to you by Stan Lee, John Buscema, Jim Mooney, John Romita, and Artie Simek. Now, true believers, let's go ahead and get started here today. We start off right off the bat. Spider-Man swinging throughout the city, and he looks like he is in a rush. And the reason why he is in a rush is because he is going to meet his Aunt May. His Aunt May is coming back from her vacation from Florida, and so now he is in quite a hurry. We see here that Jameson is looking out his window. He is saying, somebody catch Spider-Man real quick. He's swinging through the city. And all of a sudden, we see he drops his cigar, which was pretty much imported from or smuggled in from Cuba here. And we know that that is an illegal practice. And so now we see here that Spider-Man changes to his civilian identity as Peter Parker, and he is bumping into every civilian that is coming off these trains here. He's in a hurry. He's sweating here. He's just rushing so quickly. He finally sees Aunt May, and so he rushes up, and right off the bat, one thing he's trying not to do is make her worried, but once again, we know that Aunt May, and being the mother figure that she is going to start worried. And we see here that she's like, Peter, you're flushed. Look at you. You're perspiring, and you look feverish. And he's just saying, I'm not feeling bad or anything. And then he's thinking, well, if I could ever tell her that it was because I overheated from web swinging, but I can't tell her that. I can't reveal to her that I'm Spider-Man. And so then we also are introduced to our main villain, and that is Kangaroo, and it looks like he is being deported here. So we know that he is not an American citizen. And if you know anything about kangaroos, where do kangaroos live? They live in Australia. So that's exactly where this guy is from. And we see here that this guy named the Kangaroo, we don't know his civilian identity, but we see here that he attacks these two guys, and now he is leaping. As we can see, that's one of his powers. He is like a human kangaroo, and he's able to leap long distances here. And so we see here that the kangaroo tells a little bit here about his origin story. We find out that he is in fact from Kangaroo, or from from Australia, not Kangaroo. That's not a nation. Australia, and we see here that he pretty much studied kangaroos. He lived with them, he ate what they ate, and he learned how to leap like these kangaroos. And so that led him to become a professional wrestler. And so we see here there was one incident here where he got in this wrestling match and he almost killed a guy. And because of that, they're going to press charges on him because we don't know exactly if he killed this guy or not, but they are after this guy now because they think he is a killer. They think he's a beast. And so we see here that the kangaroo decides to leave the country and he goes to America. But upon arrival, these two agents find him and they say, look, we're going to New York, and from there we're going to have to deport you. But we see now we're back to the present, and the kangaroo now is saying, if they think I'm a criminal, well, guess what? I'm going to live out myself as a criminal. I'm going to do the one thing that every criminal has done, and that is I'm going to try to earn some power. I'm going to try to steal some money. So now let's catch up with Peter Parker and his favorite aunt, Aunt May here. And we see here that we learned that Aunt May's best friend, Anna Watson, who is also her roommate, is actually staying in Florida for an extra week. And so Aunt May thinks that Peter Parker has the flu here, when we know in fact that he is healthy, as we see here, healthiest Joker in the whole Western Hemisphere. But he doesn't want to upset Aunt May. He wants to stay with her to humor her a little bit, because we see that Aunt May, after all, really cares for Peter Parker. She's the one that raised Peter Parker with Uncle Ben, and he just does not want to upset her, especially after all of the illnesses she's had in the past few months here. And so Peter Parker decides, dang, what can I do? I feel like I could pretty much fight any tiger that I wanted to. I could leap bounds here, and I even want to call Gwen, but I can't, because how can I explain this to her? So now we see here that we're going to get into the meat of this story here, and that these officers are carrying something very dangerous here. And who, lo and behold, who is going to get involved? The Kangaroo. And so the Kangaroo thinks that these officers have money in this case here, but in fact, this is not money. This is something much dangerous here. And this, as we learn, as we get the Kangaroo, he steals this thing, but it's actually a vial, and he thinks that it holds jewels, but in fact, it holds something much worse, and that is a deadly gas. And if this gas were to be released, we'll find exactly what happens here as we find out on the news that this deadly vial, or this vial holds a deadly experimental bacteria, and if it is released, a plague will be spread throughout the city. It could kill thousands of people. And this gets Peter Parker's attention here. And so he has to come up with an excuse as to how he can get on the alert here, go after Kangaroo, so that he could save the lives of these New Yorkers. And so what happens here is we see that Peter Parker decides that he's going to make up an excuse here to say that he's feeling dizzy. So Aunt May rushes him to his room. What Peter Parker does next, he webs up a dummy here. It's a web dummy to replace Peter Parker, so that Aunt May will believe that he is fast asleep. And so that's what's going to allow him to change to Spider-Man and swing throughout the city on the search for the Kangaroo. And so after a few hours pass by, he finally locates the Kangaroo here, and we see that the Kangaroo is looking for cold cash. And so what we have next year is Spider-Man is going to try his best to stop the Kangaroo, because if that vial were to break, then a lot of dangerous things could happen here. And so we have a lot to worry about here. Will Spider-Man be able to get that vial in his hands and get it away from the Kangaroo? And we know that the Kangaroo has no idea what is inside of that vial. And so Spider-Man puts up a big fight here, and this is the first time that Spider-Man tackles the Kangaroo. Now let's catch up with Aunt May. We see that a few hours have passed by, and she's wanting to give some medicine to Peter Parker. She takes off some of the bed sheets, and she immediately faints, seeing that this is not Peter Parker, but it is a webbed dummy. And so she faints on Peter Parker's bed. Now let's catch up with Spider-Man and the Kangaroo here. Spider-Man's tackling the Kangaroo as best as he can. You see Spider-Man saves his life here by this strand of webbing here. He leaps back up and he says, like, you know what? I tried reasoning with you, but if you don't want to listen, we're going to have to do this the hard way then. And so he finally what he has to do is he has to swing, grab a hold of Kangaroo by his own legs, and shake him so that the vial will fall out. So the vial does fall out. Spider-Man webs it by this strand of webbing, and so finally Spider-Man is now in the possession of this vial. And so we see here that the Kangaroo gets away. Spider-Man's not too worried about it, because he believes that sooner or later the Kangaroo will be apprehended by the police. So then, now we have to worry about getting this vial back into safe hands here. We see that Spider-Man gives back the vial to the police, but the police are worried that Spider-Man may have tried to use that for his advantage. So even when Spider-Man is trying to save the lives of thousands of people, we still see that people do not trust Spider-Man because of all of the editorials found in the Daily Bugle. And so now we see here that Spider-Man's like, oh crap, I got to go back to Aunt May's house because I left that dummy in my room. And if she ever discovers that that's not me, I can't even think about it. And so lo and behold, Spider-Man finally gets back to Aunt May's house. And it's like, no! And we see here that she indeed has fainted on the bed. Peter Parker, in a moment's hesitation, throws out that web dummy and he tries his best to get Aunt May back to consciousness here. And so she finally comes back to her senses. She's awake now, and Peter Parker pretty much says here that no, you have it all wrong. That wasn't. I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know why you fainted. So now we see here that Aunt May is starting to doubt her sanity. And Peter Parker is like, man, how many times am I going to keep the secret from her and keep the shadow of Spider-Man in my life? Because sooner or later, my luck is going to run out. And how long will it hold out? That's something we're going to have to look into the future here. But next, we're going to look at the return of Electro. That's right, we haven't seen Electro in quite some time. I think it hasn't been since annual number 1, so I'm looking forward to reviewing issue number 82. We're looking at that right up next. I hope to see you next time. And until next time, keep reading comics.